Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 47. Being that we are in the days between Yud Tes Kislev and Chanukah, let me say a few words, applied Chassidus, about this period in time. There are a number of letters, numerous letters from the Rebbe, where he writes in the days between Chanukah and Yud Tes Kislev, and creates a common denominator and discusses the commonality between these two special days. Two key elements that connect them. Number one, the concept of light. Chanukah is the festival of light. Oyer, ner mitzvah v'terer, that despite that there was a victory over enemies and there were other elements of the miracle, but how was it celebrated? Through Oyer. And Chassidus asked the question, why? Pesach was also a victory over enemies, as was Purim. And the answer is because Chanukah's battle and victory was about neshama. Purim was a battle over the gufim of Eden. And Chanukah was a battle over the soul. And the soul is epitomized by Oyer, by light. Ner mitzvah v'tere'er. The Greeks, the Syrian Greeks, did not want to destroy the Jews physically. They wanted lashkicham teresecha, lavirim achuke d'tzenecha. They had no problem with that it's Torah, as wisdom, or chukim, laws, as morality and ethics, but that it's teirasecha and that it's ritzenecha, that element, the spiritual element, the soulful element, that's what they were battling over, the soul. And therefore, how do we celebrate it? Through light. What is Chassidus? Nishmasa daraisa, the soul of Torah. There's the guf of daraisa, which is the mechanics. Nigla tells you how to do things. And the soul is the primi, is the inner dimension, the vitality that discusses its impact on the soul and how to infuse it with soul. That's what Chassidus is all about. So Yud Tes Kislev, which was the celebration of the liberation of the Alter Rebbe 216 years ago, was the victory of soul over body, similar to Chanukah in that sense, but more importantly, the victory of Nishmasa Daraisa, that the time had come to reveal openly the soul dimensions of Torah, whereas before that it was known to the select few, Chidis Gula, and it was taught that way. But Yud Tes Kislev was the opening, the door, as the Rebbe Rashab writes in Torah Sholem, says in Torah Sholem, that the Ikir Yifutz Menesecha Chutza began after Yud Tes Kislev. Before that, the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe were briefer and shorter, even though Lefi Erech, relative to what was before the Alter Rebbe, was already more Chabad, but the real expansion and development of it began after Yud Tes Kislev. The second element is the element of oil. What was the mitzvah? They found a pach shemen zayis, zach, which is pure olive oil. And Chassidus, it says in Sforim, in Kabbalah and in Chassidus explains that Roza Daraisa is compared to oil. Actually, there's two levels. There's secrets of the Torah, which is like wine, and Roza Diraz, and secrets of the secrets, like oil. This is explained in Imre Bina and Barichas in Ayin Beis. And briefly, what's the difference between secrets and secrets of secrets? Shemen Sof al Gabel Yayin, that you can have the element of Shemen is even deeper than wine, because secrets means it could be a secret, I can think of it like a super conscious or a subconscious, but it's just concealed from you. And in time it will be revealed. And then there's a level of a secret that is fundamentally, chochmas timah, a fundamental unconscious state that is always remains fundamentally beyond our reach. In Ayin Beis, and Imre Bina, Ayin Beis explains, the Imre Bina, as explaining this in the sense that when there are two levels in chochmas timah, two levels in what we'll call unconscious or superconscious wisdom. Chochma Geluya is the wisdom we know, the spark of an idea that you become conscious of. But what about the other side of the curtain? Where did that consciousness come from? Where did that spark come from? So there's an unconscious state. We'll call it superconscious is a better term. That's one level. And then there's a super-conscious, which is the secrets of the secrets. Now Chassidus, as the Rebbe explains in Kuntzes Yonash Shal Teres Chassidus, which was said actually, Yud Tes Kislev Tafshin Chavov, which is the year 1965. The Rebbe explains there that based on the Imre Bina and the Ayin Beis was not yet in his Gala then, so we didn't know which Parakim discusses it. But The point being that the Yechida is the unconscious of the superconscious of the superconscious, because Chaya is superconscious. Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama is the Keiches Geluyim. So what did Chassidus really do? It helped us reveal not just the soul, but also the superconscious elements of the soul, which is one of the greatest chidushim possible, that if you can create a bridge between the inner superconscious of your psyche and personality and let it channel itself into your consciousness, into your revealed consciousness and your awareness, that's the ultimate fusion of a human being, where they both have the highest levels of transcendence, and that's concretized and actualized in their personal daily lives, which is the real ultimate goal of Chassidus, is achieving that level of connection and unity. So therefore, oil is the second connection between Chanukah and Yud Tes Kislev. In context of applied Chassidus, this means that when you think of a person and you say, okay, what are they capable of? What are we capable of? So we know what people do, but what is their possibilities? That's something far harder to achieve. So any parent, any educator, any individual would always love to know what lies in our potential and how much of our potential is being actualized. So in a very practical way, you can say the ratio between who you are and what you're capable of is the ratio between your conscious and your superconscious. So Chassidus bridges the two, like olive oil that is trapped, or you can say, not trapped, I would say, locked inside of an olive. So zayis, until you press it, it does not moitzi shamne. It does not release its oil. So pressure is the element that puts pressure in the challenges that allow our deeper potential to be expressed. And you see it in life. When people are challenged and they have competition, healthy competition, or other forces that give them an impetus, a motivation, that causes them to muster more energy in order to reach deeper into their potential. And sometimes we don't know it until there's that type of pressure. Another thing that Rebbe Rashab says in Teres Shalom, excuse me, that even though it's difficult to say, he says that the Alter Rebbe, when he came out of Peterburg, which is where he was in prison, we call it Noch Peterburg, which is after Yud Tes Kislev, the Geula, the Alter Rebbe says it's difficult to say, but it was in the category as Zayis, Ein Meitzi Shamni Shenese, that the pressure, so-called, the prison, the imprisonment, which was definitely filled with aggravation and agmas nefesh and pain, that pressure brought out the deeper oil and olive oil from the Alter Rebbe, the Gili of Chassidus, as the Baal Shem Tov of the Maggid told him, that now, not only do you continue, but on the contrary, you should actually add and increase, and your Futzaman and Chutza began to really explode until we are today in the Deir Hashvi. From then, 7 generations later, 216 years later, and our mission is to do exactly that, to be able to reach into the inner potential, the inner superconscious of every individual, every Jew, and expose that soul, that this should be able to be expressed in actuality. And Chassidus gives us the tools to do so by firstly mapping out the psyche, mapping out the spiritual genome of our DNA, our souls, our spiritual DNA, and giving us the wisdom of understanding that map, plus the behavioral and the emotional and cognitive conditioning, which is basically Naran, cognitive being Chabad, intellectual, Chacham bin Das, the intellectual faculties. Gas is emotional, Chacham Chesed Gvura Teferes, and He is the behavioral. When you are able to condition those, they become channels for revealing Kesed, which has the 2 levels of Atik and Arich, which is the 2 levels of Meiches Tema. One, Razin, the secrets, and the second, the secrets of the secrets. In Ayin Beis, he goes even further, explaining in the interface between the divine and existence. Every interface needs to have, every mamutza needs to have an element of both dimensions that it's connecting. So the so-called the secrets relate more to existence. Like it says, Arich is Reish HaNetzolim, and Atik is more, is the safe, the Tachtena Shebe Ein Sof, Atik, that it relates more to the divine. So those two come together, as he explains in Ayin Beis, the Chiddush there, that ultimately it's not just Kesed that is the interface, but in Kesed itself is the superconscious Chochmah, which is not yet conscious, that has 2 dimensions. One that relates more to existence, still concealed from existence, but it relates, and the other that relates more to the divine. And we have those two elements inside of us. Now, there are examples that we can find in our lives where one is touched. We say Yom Kippur, of course, is when Yechid is revealed. There are always times in a person's life, magical moments, when there's the Yechidah, the inner core essence, that you can't really put your finger on. And you can't even define, that becomes somewhat revealed. It's either sometimes it's in times of real pressure, and God forbid danger, sometimes an ultimate joy. And that's a deeper dimension than just the usual, and I wouldn't say usual. On Shabbos, you have more the revelation of Chai. That's why there's the fourth tefillas, fourth prayers. And Yom Kippur is the fifth prayer, which is the fifth Yechidah level of Razid de Razid. So basically, it comes down to this, that we are our ultimate objective, both in globally and personally, is to bridge these two dimensions of the inner to the outer of the outer. And this is what Chanukah symbolizes in the celebration of light, but not just light, ha'or, that comes from the deepest places, Yashish Cheshach Sisrei, from the deepest places of the deepest elements of the olive oil, which is hidden within the hidden in the olive, and Yud Tes Kislev, which essentially captures the same idea, obviously generations later, through the revelation of Nishmosa Daraisa. So Chassidus Applied, which is what we're trying to do here, is to take your deepest inner potential and actualize it in our lives. With that said, let us move on to some new questions, some follow-up. I want to begin with a question that was asked last week that I didn't end up really answering directly, even though I did answer it indirectly. And Ashgacha Pratis, it was a question about someone writing about being uncomfortable, more than one person writing, going into 770, due to the signs that are hanging, due to they feel radical elements, and they feel uncomfortable. Someone put it that this, like sometimes some people feel 770 has been taken hostage by certain individuals, etc., etc. So I read this question last Sunday, on MyLife episode 46, and sadly, something happened this week. We all know 770, which was taken hostage in a different way through that tragic stabbing and then killing of the perpetrator, which everybody has already seen on video and so on, in 770, which, as we know, as Chassidim, something happens in the Shul, in the Daled Amos, where the Rebbe davened and learned and fabrein for so many years, something not to be ignored. So I found it strangely, eerily uncanny that I literally was talking about this topic. You know, when the tragedy happened in Har Nov, so one of the things many Jews did was to begin to start going to Shul and start davening and putting on film those that didn't do that yet, or do it with more intensity, as a type of I don't know, tikkun, but at least a wake-up call. So when you see something like this happen, obviously it causes us to have to double and triple our connection to 770, to the Rebbe, to the Daled Amos of the Rebbe. As the Rebbe would always say about the Frierdiker Rebbe, that 10 years is where he davened and learned and took Yechidus and so on. Kedusha leZazim Imkema, so that's 10 years. The Rebbe from 1941 till 1994, Begashmius, is from 41, 50, what is that, 53 years. That Begashmi is the Rebbe, this is where the Rebbe davened and learned, and the Fabrengens. So you can imagine, even though maybe time, more years doesn't necessarily, you could say Kamos doesn't make a difference, but it does make a difference. The Rebbe said 10 years, so this is so many years. So clearly this is a place that's just saturated. And Kedusha leZazim Imkema. So when something like this happens, you have to right away think, how do we reconnect and connect ourselves even deeper to what 770 is about? The Rebbe says 770 is Gematria Faratzta. Tzarfas, we talked about that in previous weeks. The Sichas Vayeshev Nun Beis and other Sichas, the idea of Faratzta, which the Rebbe so initiated in such powerful terms back in Tovshen Chai and then Tovshen Chof and so on. So I find it again interesting that this question was not totally addressed. I want to address it right now in the spirit of MyLife Chassidus Applied. It's very sad to hear when someone says they feel uncomfortable to go into any shul, especially a shul which is known to accept and receive all Jews of all backgrounds, or no background. Well, there's no such thing as no background, as the Rebbe told George Rohr when he said that he leads a beginner's minyan. Beginners, so the Rebbe said, what, a beginner's minyan? No Jew is a beginner, everyone's a Ben Avram Yitzchak Yankov, so you can't say a Jew has no background. But I mean to say, not necessarily everyone with a Jewish education and so on and so forth. So it's a place that welcomes everybody and is always welcomed. So it's sad to hear that anyone feels uncomfortable. I cannot comment about all the details going on in 770 because human beings are human beings. Personally, I do believe that the Rebbe would not be happy with all signs hanging on walls. It's a shul. Shul's a shul. You don't have to have any distractions. People want to feel things in their heart. Like the Rebbe Rashab said once, as they said in the shul, it says, Shavisi Hashem L'negdi Samid, they put it up on the Aron Kodesh. And we also have it in our Aron Kodesh. But the Rebbe Rashab said, bei uns ist das eingekritzt in Herz, it's in our heart. So these signs, if they do signify a certain element of amunah, why it should be primarily in the heart, and I do not believe that the Rebbe would want to be all over the place in the shul. It's my opinion, and I say clearly my opinion. I always like to quote sources. I don't have a source for it, but my hergish would be that. That still does not mean I'm uncomfortable to go there, because the divrei Torah are not affected by what human beings do. And I would say that anyone who feels uncomfortable should get over that. And frankly, 770 will be defined by the people who go there. So avoiding to go to a place such a Makom Gedusha is not necessarily a way to change things. To go there and not necessarily impose your will, but to neutralize, if there is any radical elements, by neutralizing it by simply saying, I'm part of the shul, this is what I expect. So it's true, there are people, listen, Chabad Lubavitch is very diverse, there are people of all types of backgrounds, but as I've said many, many times, no one has a right to impose their opinions on anyone else. 770 is a mukim, the Dal Ramos of the Rebbe, the davening, the learning, Shabbos, Yontif, Abrengens. I mean, anyone who's been there, the hours, the hundreds and hundreds of hours. So that does not go away, and I don't believe any should be held hostage by anybody, if anyone wants to even use those words. So it's sad to hear, and I think it may be an opportunity now, is that every Jew is welcome there, every Jew should come there, and Adrab, Shul should reflect the whole diversity, and it should not be controlled by any elements. Chaz v'shalom, should be controlled by halacha, by Torah, by Chassidus, and not by any individuals who decide that they have a certain way to do things. There are other individuals that have a different way, and a shul should not be a place where you, of a platform where of political positions or spiritual positions even. Shul's a shul, every Jew can come and daven, doesn't have to be disturbed when he's davening by someone else yelling at him or screaming, whatever they may be. Every person should be welcome. It's like you're welcoming guests in the house. I remember very clearly, vividly, when the Rebbe spoke so passionately about a shul having even a coffee machine, having a place where people can have something to eat or bite, not in the shul itself, obviously, but to have that type of welcoming spirit. So frankly, in the spirit of positivity, our job is to spread light. Chanukah and Yud Tes Kislev is the message of light, that a little light can dispel the greatest amount of darkness. So I want to say is that obviously Chaz v'shalom that 770 has any element of darkness. This week there was a dark moment, but our objective is to bring a rush, an eruption of tremendous light in a place that is the center of the world, a place that serves as the central headquarters, lack of a better word, central merkaz of the Rebbe's activities, and a place that should be a source of chayis and life for everybody be welcome. At the end of the day, when there are different opinions, you sit down with rabbonim, you sit down with mashpiyim, you come to some type of terms instead of one opinion dominating over another. And no question, if people did that with a little bittel, that we would be in a position where we'd be able to have shalom al Yisrael and not have to, and machlekes or different opinions can be done in private, or can be done, or be eliminated altogether. But even if it has to be done, it can be done under private, behind closed doors. It does not have to affect a place that's such a holy place. This simply comes down to people having bittul and sitting down, and no one dominating, and no one saying, I'm the boss, you're the boss. This a shul for every Jew on earth. I think that suffices with that issue. But there was another follow-up that I want to address regarding that topic, and then we will go on. And that is, of course, I want to extend also a refuah shleimah to the bacha that was stabbed and made completely as if it never and should only have good news going forward. There was a question in regard to follow-up with this issue. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, I listen to your episodes faithfully every week with great respect and interest. One of the subjects covered in this episode, referring to the last episode, 46, is the question whether the Rebbe is Moshiach or not. I do not understand the approach to the question of Moshiach. This is the most fundamental pillar of Yiddishkeit. Is this question open to interpretations and opinions? If we have sources from the Torah, Chassidus, as well as Sichos, what is the answer? Is the Rebbe Moshiach or not according to the sources? If we are just relying on different interpretations and we can accept either answer, where is the emes? How can two opposing opinions be part of the same truth? Of course, there have to be true peace and obviously so, but when talking about the most fundamental question, how can there be different ways of interpreting it? Can we say that we just do not know either way? If we take an issue of mixing milk and meat, are there different opinions today? So how can there be such polarizing stance on this, being that this is a truly fundamental issue? Excuse me. How is it that today we have absolute uniform thinking about certain questions and not on a major question such as Moshiach? Okay. I believe I answered it, but since some people have followed up, let me be even more blunt. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Malachim, at the end of Hilchos Malachim, that there are things we know and most things we don't know about Moshiach. So if there's something that remains not known, it means it will be revealed when the time has come, or it will be told when we need to know. The idea that identifying a person as Moshiach, or it doesn't say anywhere in Mitzvah Sesa Daraisa that one has to do that altogether. The fact is that the Rambam does give qualifications, the Torah does give criteria, and there were people who did identify their teacher or their master in the Gemara and other places as Moshiach. But nowhere is a Mitzvah Sesa Daraisa. Since it isn't a Mitzvah Sesa Daraisa, which means a must, so it doesn't mean that maybe you don't have an answer for certain questions. When a person has a hergish, a feeling, that's fine. The fundamental issue is to know the following, that it's a mitzvah and it's a ikir and amunah to believe in Mashiach and to wait for his arrival, as the Rambam paskins, and that we should do whatever is possible, my seinu to bring Mashiach. If it's so fundamental, the Alter Rebbe would have written it in Tanya, we would have it in Shulchan Aruch, and it's not. It's fundamental, Mashiach is fundamental. The issue, the identity of Mashiach, may be fundamental to a person individually, but if it's fundamental as a mitzvah sesa, we would know about it. So the answer is that the key thing is, what actions are you going to do? What are you going to do? If your beliefs are going to bring you to be a better Jew, a warmer Jew, a more refined person, a kinder person, a gentler person, and spread the light of Torah, Yiddishkeit, and Chassidus, then by all means, let it be your motivator. If it's not, and it's just going to be a debate of two people debating who, what, when, has no tayelis. Everything has to have a result. So therefore, the question is a very interesting question, but it's not. But if it was a fundamental issue, we would have that clarity. Under the circumstances, we have what it says in the Torah, and what it doesn't say, we don't know. Everybody can interpret as they wish, and no one can impose their opinions on someone else. The only thing we're asked is go up Torah, follow sources, follow what we were told, and above all, let it translate into action. If the Rebbe said the ikar of Yefutza Manesach Chutza is to bring the Geula, if every corner of your city had a shir in Chassidus, had a shir in the Yoni Geula Mashiach, then you could say, I have nothing more to do. Since that's not the case, and since there are 14 million Jews, a large percentage of which don't even know what the word Mashiach means, a larger percentage of which, God forbid, tragically, do not even know what Chassidus means, what a Rebbe is, what Yud Tes Kislev is, what the meaning of Chanukah is. So we have our job cut out for us. It doesn't mean we have to wait till we reach everyone, but we have to do our effort. And that's where the real focus should be. There's debates and discussions about things that, frankly, probably don't have real nafkamina l'peil, debates that go really nowhere, is a waste of time. What is not a waste of time is what you're going to do. And that's something that we, each of us is incumbent. That's what we were told, and that we have the ability to shape the unfolding drama of the Geula through our Maiseinu v'Avodesenu, our actions, as he says in Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin. Let us now go, next question. Since it was coming from Yud Tes Kislev, there was a question about Yad Chassidim al Alyen. A fellow writes, I live in a small Midwest town. The local community is very successful in building up their shul, reaching out to the Jewish kids at the local college campus, and we hardly get a minyan, meaning the Chabad group. Our shul is in the basement for the past 22 years and having a very hard time reaching Jews. If we are told that Yad Chassidim al Alyen, how come this a non-Chassid who doesn't follow the Alter Rebbe's way is successful, and we the Chassidim are struggling. First of all, the Alter Rebbe made it clear that Chassidus is not a maflega, it's not a party, it's not a partisan thing. It's for all Jews. If any Jew anywhere in the world is building a shul, reaching Jews, we applaud it and we support it. This isn't a corporate competition. Adrabah, there's no monopoly over Chassidus, over Torah, and halavai, every person on earth should be following the directives of the Alter Rebbe and the Rebbe, whether they know it or not, and so on. So we should celebrate that. If a shul is successful across the street, whether it's Chabad shul or not a Chabad shul, that should motivate you, Kinei Sofrim Tarba Chachma, and figure out what to do. Not Chaz v'Shalom to undermine, God forbid, the other shul, but to find a way to inspire. I mean, lahavdil in business, if you see competition, what do? You have to advertise your product. You have to show people that there's value to it. If you have Chassidus, the richest resource we have, the great treasure, the Chem de Gnuza, the Evan, the Keser and the Evan Hamel, the Keser, the Evan Yekara, the most precious stone in the king's crown, was given to us by the Rabbeim with Mesiras Nefesh. So that even one drop goes into the powder that comes from that stone, one drop goes inside the clenched teeth of a comatose child, it's worth it. Figure out how to show, and I don't want to say sell, market, how to demonstrate the power of Chassidus, and you'll have lines and lines of people. I ask you, the person who has this question, do you have confidence in that? Do you have confidence that Chassidus has that power? And if you don't, find some mashpiyim, find someone that can help you build that confidence. And then, step 2, how to actualize it. That's our mission and job. And not if you feel bad about this, see it as a impetus, a catalyst to get you going. Maybe that's the reason that we actually have different communities and different individuals. Maybe it's to get us motivated, stimulated to a challenge, like the pressure of the olive, in order to extract the olive oil, deeper oil. That's my response to this question. Yad Chassidim al Yad Chassidim al is absolutely the case. Yud Tes Kislev, the ability to recognize, like the Alter Rebbe, that will ultimately prevail. But as the Alter Rebbe writes in the famous Egeres HaKedesh, Beis, Simon Beis, La'achre Peterburg, where he writes Ketenti Mekol Achsodim, one of the most powerful letters, how he talks how he's humbled by all the greatness, by all the kindness that was shown to him. Like Yaakov Avinu said, and one of the things he says that we should not lay lisrik aleim. We should not gloat, and we shouldn't in any way be condescending to those that oppose Chassidus. On the contrary, our job is to spread light, and that's what we have to do, with the positivity of the whole experience of Yud Tes Kislev. Okay. With that said, let's move to the next discussion here. Trust issues, the issue of trust. Before I'd say that, I want to just go back to Chanukah for a moment, just share an interesting episode. A number of years ago, my colleague, Rabbi Yeshua Metzger from Chabad of Midtown, was involved in producing advertisements, full-page ads in the New York Times and other newspapers. And one of them was a Chanukah ad. And he had asked me to help him prepare the text, which the Rebbe then proceeded to edit. And I titled it, Whispering Flames. And it was several lessons that we learned from Chanukah. Lesson, for example, the ones I mentioned, and a few more I'll just mention briefly. Whispering Flames. Number 1 is that the power of light. A little light dispels darkness. Lighting the menorah at the evening, because our mission is to illuminate the dark. As I said, the natural power of light over darkness. Every night we add a flame, Mailim B'Kedesh, to grow in good deeds. We talked about the colors, the different colors of the flame, reflecting the different shades and hues of life. And a few other lessons, all based, of course, on the Frierdiker Rebbe's line, we have to listen to the story that the flames tell us. And hence the name, Whispering Flames, messages from the flames of Chanukah. The Rebbe edited And the few edits that I wanted to point out was, number one, whispering flames. The Rebbe circled the word whispering and wrote, it's not silent. Whisper implies silent, quiet, subdued. The whole idea of Chanukah is Pesum and hence the public menorahs and so on. Now, my point with whispering obviously was a poetic line. Clearly, the Rebbe, I'm sure, appreciated my poetry, but more importantly, didn't want to give a suggestion that whispering flames can imply that it should be done behind closed doors. So the Rebbe changed it. So I remember racking our brain. I think at the end of the story, at the end of it, we called it Once Upon a Flame, or the story of the flames, or something of that nature. That was one thing. When we wrote about the colors changing, the light, Chanukah lights, so the Rebbe wrote, the colors don't change. The flame flickers, but the colors remain colors. There's blue, there's the yellow, there's the white. Chassidus talks of Neir Uchma, Neir Chivra, Neir Tichla. There's the different shades. But I wrote it in a way that it sounded like they changed, and the Rebbe wrote that, corrected that. Just pointing out because I thought it's an interesting lesson since we're coming from Chanukah. So now let's go to trust issues. Major trust betrayed. How can one rebuild after being hurt or broken in a deep way? Yes, it's a serious issue, and this can apply in so many different situations. So let me read a few questions in this regard. Question 1. How does a person overcome major trust issues after being betrayed? How can I rebuild after being hurt to such an extent, according to Chassidus? Question 2. Thank you for all you do. Your explanations of the Torah and advice for dealing with life's issues make me stronger. I'm divorced, father of 3 daughters, and have been single for 8 years. I spend most of my time off with my family. Don't have much desire to date, but I do wish to be involved in a relationship. My problem is I'm divorced due to a dysfunctional marriage which involved infidelity. I've always found it hard to trust others since I was young. Early in life, I've dealt with betrayal, and as an adult, I find infidelity playing a big part in today's society and among many of today's marriages. Can the Torah help me consciously let my guard down, allow me to be comfortably vulnerable, and really love again? I feel as if the wind in my sails has died down, and I'm simply floating along life's ripples and trying to avoid the storms without much gusto for life. Not very attractive, I know. Thank you for your time, MLC listener and follower. Question 3. What to do when terribly let down by spiritual role model, especially in a shocking scandal, for example, the mikveh in DC scandal. He's not writing about that, he's just giving that as an example. Okay. And many more questions. Some of them I chose not to read on air for obvious reasons, because it's a very painful subject, and it begins even from young age, where you trust a parent or a mentor or an educator, and then they betray you in some way. And we're assuming that it's a true betrayal, meaning that they exposed the confidence, or in some other way that you felt the trust was breached. This has deep impact on people, because then you don't let your guard down so quickly, you don't trust so quickly, to the detriment of yourself and others, because when it comes to relationships, trust is a cardinal, a fundamental cornerstone of relationship. And if your trust has been hurt, you don't want to trust so quickly. You test people. You want them to prove themselves. I once heard a line, a very good line, I don't remember where it was from, but it said, trust is built not on perfection, but on accountability. There's no such thing as a perfect person. People who've been hurt often look for perfection. I want the perfect person. They may not put it that way, but that's what they're looking for. That's unrealistic. What you're looking for is accountability. When Moshe went up on Har Sinai and begging for forgiveness for the Jewish people who betrayed God and lost his trust, because here God gave them the 10 Commandments, and for 39 days later, they built a golden calf. Moshe did not say the Jews are perfect. He didn't say, let's forgive them and move on. He said, we will be accountable. And therefore give us a day of forgiveness, in which God granted ultimately Salachti Kidvarecha on Yom Kippur. The point accountability means that you're honest. Everyone makes a mistake. Everyone can make a mistake. What do you do next? Do you cover up? Do you lie? Do you blame somebody else? Do you minimize? It's very difficult to acknowledge, because you think, you know what, I'll just cover it up. But as they say, the silence is worse than the crime. They say it's sometimes stronger. The silence is worse than the rape. Because the mistake is a mistake. The crime is a crime, and a serious crime. But the cover-up is like denying a person the pain. When someone says, nothing happened to you, everything is fine. That can be worse than the crime because you're not even letting me cry. You're not even allowing me the dignity of my pain, the dignity to say that, yes, I matter and my pain matters. So cover-ups and denial and silence that follows serious breaches is an often far deeper pain, far deeper cut than the original crime. The original crime can be the biggest, a more intense element, and of course is the root of it all. But the cover-up doesn't allow you to heal. It will be like a person has an infection. No, you have no infection. And it just grows and grows and grows internally and implodes within. I'm speaking about the dynamics and the anatomy, dissecting the anatomy of a broken trust in order to understand how, obviously, to repair it. So once something has been breached in that level, you have to go back to that. The only place you can fix something is b'mkeide, like it says, hamtokes gvuras is b'sharsham, Chassidus says. To sweeten the severities, you have to go to the root. Why? You cannot solve a problem that comes from a deeper place on a superficial level. You put a Band-Aid on a wound that is deeper than the Band-Aid is covering, the Band-Aid will just deal with the outer levels. You have to go to the root. Since the trust was breached, which is a deep element where two people had a connection and something was broken, you have to go back to that place, as Moshe did on Har Sinai, which teaches us many lessons of how to regain trust. So we have that as a model. So regaining trust is not an easy thing to do. It's a lot of introspection. It's a lot of looking inside yourself, also not blaming yourself. There's elements of forgiveness, forgiving yourself, forgiving someone else. As we spoke before, Yom Kippur, laws of forgiveness. It doesn't just mean you just forgive and then forget. It's a process. But to give up on yourself and say, you know what, since things happened, I will no longer trust, is really not healthy. And ultimately, you are then becoming your own worst enemy. So the challenge here is to find ways to reconnect. So you could always overcome. Just know that you can. I don't know if it's the scope of MyLife Chassidus Applied right here online to be able to lay out the actual steps, because every individual situation is different. Who betrayed the trust? How was it done? And for how long a period? And also our personalities are different. So you really need someone who can guide you in a kind and gentle and caring way, whoever it may be, to help you get through that. But that's critical. You cannot let it sit. If a trust was broken, every day you don't do something about it, your doors will close tighter. And the armor will get thicker, and it'll be harder to pierce your defensive mechanisms. So it's critical to nip it in the bud and to get ways. And I'm not talking about in any way forcing the issue. It takes time to build. The Rambam paskins that tshuva means you go back to the same situation and you don't do it again. Tshuva doesn't mean you just avoid the whole thing and you go move on. That may be first step, but ultimately the real tshuva that can be trusted is when you know you can go back to the place of the crime and same situation, and this time you don't do it. It's similar with trust. It's about going back to those sensitive places. Not necessarily always confronting the person that hurt you, but going back to those sensitive places and allowing yourself to live there again. And yes, to ultimately embrace vulnerability and know that love in all relationships, all emotional relationships, requires a two-way street. You have to open the door for someone to come in and for you to go out. To just put up walls and defensive mechanisms means, yes, maybe no one can get in so no one will hurt you, but you'll also not get out and you will never experience an emotional experience. So it's a topic that is hard to talk about, as I said, individually in general terms, but nevertheless an important one, and that's why I'm addressing it. If Chanukah and Yud Tes Kislev have any lesson, what is darkness in our personal lives? Besides depression and anxiety, darkness is also broken trusts. When you live alone and you feel that nobody gets you, or you feel that you've been hurt. Hurt is a lonely place. So what is Chanukah if not about illuminating darkness, bringing light to a place that's dark? It's nice lines to say it in general terms, philosophical terms. You know where it's really difficult? Can you do it in your personal life? Can you find that pure pach shemen that was not touched by and defiled by any outside force? To say that was gone and defiled to the point that your trust was broken, you were betrayed, is defying the whole concept of Chanukah, which means that the crucible of oil, that flask of oil, there's a flask of a pure oil within you. It may be trapped, it may be locked. You have to find that, and then, surprise, surprise, You light it, it doesn't just burn for one day, it burns for 8 days. So we all have that element, and this is a lesson you can apply based on Chassidus to a situation where there's a broken trust, a type of darkness. More specifically, I will just say a few more words about this, and following as follows. And that is, besides having a mashpia or someone you can talk to and address it, and that alone, by breaking that silence, allows you to address and redress the pain that one goes through when there's a breach. There's obviously going to be, if it's a marriage, there's going to be a need for some reconciliation. Hopefully not to the point of breaking and divorce and so on, but that takes work. To do that is not an easy thing to do because everybody goes into forms of distorted situations when they are confronted. So you need to know how to do it very effectively. Very hard to do it yourself when there's, God forbid, an infidelity or any other type of betrayal. It's critical to have a third party that brings the people together and assesses the situation. And the first step is the honesty, the accountability. If that's there, you have something to build upon. And Moshe is a good example. Moshe was not there when the Jews built the Egel. He was up in heaven. Reid, lech reid megedulascha. He had to go down. But Moshe served as the third party, God and the people. The ultimate therapist, the ultimate mediator, Moshe Rabbeinu, Shushbina de Malka. And he was able to bring them together, and that's a lesson of how we have to do it as well. So Moshe Rabbeinu's behavior and how he spoke to the Eibishter is a good lesson of the steps that need to be done. So the first step is always bringing in a third party who can look at the situation a little more objectively, assess by speaking to both parties, and then come up with some recommendations of creating a, not necessarily peace, but at least a calm situation where you can talk about things. And I believe that people who love each other deeply, if they sense accountability and they sense the other person is truly looking inside themselves, they will be more forgiving. If they don't sense that, if they sense the person just wants to move on, wants to get away with it, wants to say lip service, whatever is necessary to ignore the situation, obviously that does not build trust. So it's interesting how accountability slowly starts cultivating trust, because you see a person struggling with it and you see them. That doesn't mean it fixes it right away. What happens, however, is that when something, a breach of trust, it brings out the worst or the best in us. The worst in us it could bring out because we suddenly feel, it just shows how people just use me, abuse me, etc. And you get the cynical attitude, the resigned attitude to looking at people. That's why it's critical to, as I said, nip it in the bud or address it as quickly as possible in order not to allow the layers of jadedness and cynicism and skepticism to begin to manifest, because then you have a new cancer to contend with. Well, we should all not have to ever experience anything like this, but we live in a world after Chet Tzadas where duplicity exists, where trust can be broken. And of course, the best thing is to remember that the people you love, and preemptive medicine, preventive medicine is the best, is be very careful. The people that you love are vulnerable, as you are. And the sacred trust that people give you, that whether it's in a marriage, whether it's parents and children, whether it's educators and students, or general friends, is sacred. It's sacred ground. Think twice, think 10 times, 50 times before you do something that can hurt another person. Even hurting yourself is not allowed, but hurting another person, because you never know kind of irreparable damage and how much work is necessary. You know, that line that I like so much, I don't think it comes from Chassidus sources, but it's a line that definitely captures Chassidus. It says that's far easier to shape a child, to shape a healthy child than to fix a broken adult. And sometimes you think how many hours you spend on trying to fix broken adults could have all been prevented. And trust, the first trust is built in the home, built in an environment where children who are completely vulnerable, they learn trust from what their parents do to them and do for them. So we'll never forget the sacred trust that we were bestowed with. We were given as a gift, gifted with by God, and treasure them, the preciousness of how you behave. And if a person took themselves seriously and took others seriously, in general, there'd be less breaches. But if there's a breach, there are also methods. Do not give up. There are always ways to deal with things. Never ever give up. That's the most important thing. Forge ahead. There's always a glimmer of hope. There's always that flask of oil somewhere that is hidden. The pach shemen, that's sealed with the ches mishal kein gadol. Like Chassidus says, that's called chochmah law, which is like shemen. I spoke before about chochmah stima, a pure place that has never been defiled by no matter what happens. So even if all the oils, kol hashmonim, apsulim, were all defiled, they were all defiled by the Syrians and the Greco-Syrians, however we call them. Nevertheless, there's always that one flask that remains intact. That is the ultimate lesson of Chanukah. So never ever give up on yourself or on others. Okay. Does Hashem love non-Jews? Can they be good? Okay, the issue of non-Jews was addressed in previous episodes 30, 31, and 32. So I refer you to there, but nevertheless, because some questions came in on this, let me address this. Okay. So I'm covering everything. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your wonderful classes. Non-Jews, are they good? Tanya mentions they are made of the four elements that are bad. Not four, but you probably mean, well, Dal you say this, Shalosh Klippas Hatmeis. Aside from the ones that stem from Klippas Nega, can we say the others are inherently good? Does Hashem love them? Question number 2. Hi, Rabbi. My day is filled with obsessive thoughts in this one topic. I'm not sure if I can specify my exact worry, but I'll try. I feel that I am 100% Jewish, but Baruch Hashem, when I was about 5 years old, my family became Jewish, coming from a background where my parents thought they were Jewish, being raised by that way in Russia. However, later on, they found out that they weren't because their mothers were not. So on a basic level, I feel it's very simple how we became Jewish. I went to mikveh, had a kosher bris, and now Baruch Hashem Jewish. However, when I learned Chassidus in yeshiva, and it starts talking about the neshama, etc., I start going through a whole circle of questions on how do I know I really was given one neshama meaning. How do I know my mitzvahs are actually working? Maybe I don't have a neshama. Weird thoughts like weird thoughts like these pop up. And I know the Rebbe says, excuse me, the Rebbe says Gershon is Geir, but sometimes I don't feel like I am that. I start questioning how could it be that simple, that as a little child I didn't know the difference between anything, and my parents decided to become Jewish, that now I automatically become Jewish, or when I accept it upon myself when I'm 13. How is it that simple to receive a neshama? What does it mean? I have a friend who also recently became Jewish. The original reason he was open to Judaism was through a Jewish girl. Then after they broke up, he continued to pursue conversion, and he successfully made it. But I get so bothered by the fact that how could he just become a Jew like that? He might have had the wrong intentions. He's not fully aware of all that Judaism entails, and it's hard to maintain. And it's hard work to maintain Judaism. How does he just become Jewish, receiving or revealing his neshama? I don't understand. This question only started bothering me up until I went to yeshiva when I was 17. I apologize, I have a cough here. Before then, I felt like my biggest, proudest Jew, being that I was raised with it since I was born, being that parents always thought they were Jewish. Please help. Okay. So even though the questions are not completely related, regarding the first question, since I addressed it back then, I'm not going to go through the whole arichas, the whole length. You can go back to those episodes 30 to 32. But since there's a second question, I decided just to say a few points about it. The issue with the non-Jews, as I explained then, is much more complicated than just what it says in Tanya. What it says in Tanya says in Tanya. Then there's the issue of Goyishkeit, and there's the issue of Goyim. Echsidu Misa'elam, which is the righteous Gentiles. When Mashiach comes, and the Rebbe says we're on the threshold of Mashiach's arrival, the world will be Echsidu Misa'elam. Yesh lem chelik le'elam haba. the world is ready, meaning that the world is receptive to the concepts of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach. So to just dismiss the whole world as Shol Shlips Atmeis and all be erased, we know is not the Rebbe's approach, because the world has become more refined. The concept of Goyishkeit, the concept of the Kanani, the concept of Lemaisa Kanani and so on, remains Shol Shlips Atmeis. And if someone still lives in that way, obviously it refers to them. So to look at a bunch of non-Jews, 7 billion non-Jews in this world, almost, as not good, bad people, that's not the way Judaism thinks. Judaism thinks, Ner LaGoyim, LaGoyim, we have to influence. God created them, they have a purpose. The purpose is for them to live up to the divine calling. You don't have to become Jewish to live up to your divine calling. And they have a Nitzuz Gedusha, they have a Nefesh, they have Adam Nivra B'Tzelem, Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem. They're created B'Tzelem Elikim, the good divine image. And living up to that divine image is their position. So go back to those episodes and you'll hear more details about it. That's the gist of it. And in our times, we've been told clearly that the world has become refined. If the Avodah Zarah is far less common, even if it's there, it still exists in the East, Far East. It's not something common. Most of it is Ma'isa V'Seim B'Yadayim, as the Ramah Paskins, which means it's just cultural. It's negated to the laws in this period of time, the holiday season, whether you can be a partner in a business that sells these gifts of holidays, because if it's Avodah Zarah, you're not allowed to have any hana, afilu b'mashu. So clearly, it's a far different world than once was. It does not negate or change what it says in halacha and what it says in Sfarim, but you have to know who you're talking to. So when the bottom line is that when you meet a Jew, a non-Jew in the street, or a non-Jew in business, or in a cab, or on a subway, or on a plane, you have an obligation to talk to that person about God and about their obligations, just like to a Jew. Clear, the sikhs of the mems, the Rebbe made it very, very clear what our role is. Obviously, b'dar kaneim, in a kind way, in a positive way, based on Hilchus Malachim Seif Perek Ches, that just like it's a mitzvah, the mitzvahs we have is also a mitzvah in every Jew to influence and inspire non-Jews. And not only that, in the ethical commandments, but also in the area that they should know it's coming from Sinai. You could check that out and check out again those sikhs and also what I spoke back in episodes 30 to 32. Regarding the second question, well, my friend, yes, it may not be so simple, and we're not experts on souls, but we know the following. Someone that's Nizgayed al pi halacha means that their neshama is a Jewish neshama. That's it. But you quote Gershin Nizgayed, that's why it's not Gershin Nizgayed, not Goyshin Nizgayed, as the Rebbe brings from the Chidah and from Maram, where is it? The Maram Shif, maybe, not Maram Shif. It's brought in different places in Sikhs. The din is, we say Goyshin is Gaia, not Gershin is Gaia, not Goyshin is Gaia, because there's a nitzutz, the spark is there. Whatever reason, it wandered into a non-Jewish family, a non-Jewish body. But once there's a gir api halacha, which means that he went through all the rigorous process and all the halacha says about it, that means why would a person irrationally want to be Jewish? After you dissuade him and to show him how much anti-Semitism and how difficult it is and how many mitzvahs there are, why? So we know there's ulterior motives. It could be a girlfriend, it could be a boyfriend, it could be different factors. But at the end of the day, if it's al pi halacha, and Rabbanim Paskin, the person went to mikveh, with Mekabel mitzvahs and the bris, Tofes Dam bris, whatever it may be, that shows that their neshama is a Yiddish neshama that wandered into a place like that. But you have to go through the halachic process to reveal that. You can't just say, hey, a guy looks like he's Jewish or has Jewish tendencies or Jewish personality. So absolutely, it's like a goy, it's like a Gershin's guy, it's a stranger. The spark is there. That's very clear in Sfarim and so on. The Rambam writes to Rabbi Vadia Ger, which I believe I cited in earlier episodes, when he bemoans the fact that his yichus, because he was a great scholar, a great Jew, but his yichus doesn't have a yichus. And he was saddened about it. So the Rambam says, your yichus is greater than a born Jew, because a born Jew goes back to Avram Yitzchak Yankov, mortals. And your yichus is l'misha amar v'haya elam. Your yichus goes straight to God himself, which itself is an interesting lesson, and many lessons can be learned from it. The bottom line is all Jews are Geirim Shenizgayed. That's why the mitzvahs of Avos HaGer, to love, because Ger HaYisu, you were a Ger in Mitzrayim, and the Eibusha took you out of that. And all the laws of Geirus are from where? From Sinai, from Matan Torah. That's why we eat milk chiks on Shavuos, because the Kalim had to be toivel, etc., because they were technically went over from the status of a non-Jew to a Jew. Whatever non-Jew meant before Matan Torah, but that was the status. So the Kabbalah's mitzvahs, that Tofes Dam Bris, or the mitzvah milah that was happened after Pesach, after Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Kabbalah's mitzvahs, and the Svardim talk about the mikveh part, where was there a mikveh, etc. But regardless, they went through Geiris. So we all began that way. Avram Avinu, in a way, is also, he started one way and then he became, so even though it may not sound, it may sound complicated, but you say it's simple, that you just know it's not simple. That process is a divine process of how to reveal the neshama within a person and feel at peace that you're a Jew, complete Jew, live up to it, be proud of it, focus not on your thoughts, focus on actions, learn Chassidus, learn Nigla, be around people that are positive, and though there may be challenges, like Rabbi Vadia Ger had, know that your yichus go straight to the Eibishter, and that your neshama is completely intact, and that's the bottom line. Okay, next question. Women's role, better at home or work? I'm a full-time mother, Baruch Hashem, and these classes are great inspiration on the go. I also appreciate your impartiality and the way you approach sensitive issues. I'm wondering if you can address a woman's role in the Lubavitch today. We have all the important we have the all-important task of raising children. However, at the same time, there are many mothers who have teaching shlichus jobs. What was the Rebbe's opinion on this? Better to be a full-time mommy or work in shlichus? I just had my second child and debating if I should go back to teaching. There are so many letters, sichos, where the Rebbe talks about the brachas you bring to your family when involved in chinuch shlichus. What if you live in a community where there's no one else available to teach? Am I required to make that mesiras nefesh? On the other hand, there's no greater job than raising our children. I know you can't answer this on a personal level. I would just like you to state the sources for both. Thanks a lot. Okay, good. Well, thank God we have many, many answers from the Rebbe to this issue. There's no question on akeres habayis. The foundation of the home is the mother, and the primary role is to bring up the children in the home, because what better way can you shape the future than having healthy children? And that's a primary role of a mother, especially in the earlier years. Frankly, a father's role should also be that. His job is just a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. But al pi Torah, a woman has those strengths, and that's her primary role. Yet the Rebbe made it very clear that women should also be activists in a kfud bas melech pnima tznius way, and that they should be part of the leadership of a community, and they should not just raise their own families, they should host, they should teach, they should use their potential and their skills and tools to be mashpia. There are many reasons why the Rebbe said that. Maybe it was preempting the feminist rise of feminism. The Rebbe was the ultimate feminist when he established Nashei B'nai Chabad in Israel, in New York, in the world. But the Rebbe wanted both. Obviously, case by case, and when it comes to prioritizing, but the Rebbe wanted both, and the fact of the matter is that one can do both, and they enhance each other. I see people who have large families, but they also remain educators, and first of all, it gives them a sense of their own dignity, even though being a mother is a great dignified thing, but sometimes going out and being teaching and using your skills just keeps you also a balance in your life where you're not just completely overwhelmed at home. As beautiful as that may be, psychologically, it also gives you a sense of identity. Many mothers will complain and say, I lose myself. All I am is a mother to my children. That may be a wrong statement, but it is a sentiment that's legitimate. And we have to know how to balance that. One of the ways to balance it is to also use your skills in ways with adults or with others, or teaching or other things to do. That's just one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is the fact is God gave us strengths that have to be used. Now, there's no question it takes a lot of creativity and innovation to bring up healthy children, but at the same time, there's a communal needs out there. So the Rebbe saw husband and wife as partners in influencing the community in which they live, and that's every community. So my answer to you is, I can't tell you when to go back to work and teaching, but I would encourage you to definitely go, pace it properly, and you have the power to do both, and will not in any way compromise your mothering. There's obviously a difference when a child is still at home, the children go to school. After a few years today, children start going to school. So you're alone. Why shouldn't you be using that time alone when the children are at school for something that's not just resting and relaxing? Now, I'm not suggesting one shouldn't rest and relax. I'm just suggesting that it's important to know that we have a responsibility not just to our immediate family, but also to our larger family, which is the community around us. And this is many letters that I can quote. I don't have them right offhand. I'll try to find them and I can cite the chapter and verse as I try to do in each episode. But there's no question this is the Rebbe's general approach. And as you said, case by case, personally, that has to be addressed on a personal level. But the general philosophical approach is what I've just said. And then, of course, there's the age when the children leave the home, and then what? Well, you're not a mother anymore. So, of course, you could be a good bubby and help out your children as they bring up their children. But still, every person needs something for their own their own fulfillment and identity, to use their keiches to reach out much more than just one's family, though family is the number one priority. Finally, let's conclude with the Rambam. Being that tomorrow is or today actually is the end of the cycle, the Sima Rambam, which began in Tafshin Mem Dalet. So it's a Sima already. From Tafshin Mem Dalet till now, we're talking about Nun Dalet, Samad Dalet, Ayin Dalet, 30 years. So it's the 30th, the end of the 30th cycle that I remember vividly, that Achar Shal Pesach, when the Rebbe spoke the Sikha and initiated the learning of Rambam, the learning of 3 prakim every day, or a Perek a day and you finish in 3 years, or Sefer HaMitzvahs, giving options to everyone. So the question someone asks is, the 3-year cycle for Rambam is about to begin. With all of my other obligations, do you think I should put this on my priority list? Absolutely. This is the Rebbe's direct initiative, and the reasons the Rebbe gave then, interestingly, wasn't just limud HaTorah. It was also about Avos and Achdus Yisrael. Being that the Torah is, the Rambam brings all Cholkei HaTorah, all parts of the Torah. So every Jew connects through that because every one of us is connected to different Seichel, Kena B'Seir Secha, to a different part of the Torah. So it's the Negei the Rebbe connected to the Geula, to Avos and Achdus Yisrael, and to learning Kol HaTorah Kula. So, and being that it's the Rebbe initiated, clearly understanding that in our time, that this is a force that can help bring the Geula, that can help bring unity among us as people, that can help us personally. There's no question this is a takana from the Rebbe. This is not an option. The Rebbe asked, that everyone should do it. So there's no question, I mean, that anyone that considers themselves a chassid, or just even a follower, or whatever you want to call yourself, this is a direct takana. Just like Chitas, the Frierdiker Rebbe established, the Rebbe established Rambam. And the benefits of it are also clear. People who learn the Rambam, even if they learn it on a more cursory level, not in depth, come away with the ideas. You're constantly learning every year or every 3 years. You're learning the whole Torah. So you touch upon everything. It has to help you firstly in knowledge, number 2 in inspiration, number 3 in a certain element of passion as you cover the entire picture. So there's no question that I encourage. I encourage. The Rebbe doesn't need my encouragement, but the fact is that the Rebbe's takana is something we should all embrace. Now is a good opportunity as the cycle begins. Hashgacha Prati is right before Chanukah, Chav Gimel Kislev. And everyone should be matzliach in their learning. And as the Rebbe said in that sikh, when he was Messiah, that the Rambam Pascha, the Rambam is Messiah, the Sefer of the Rambam is what? It's about Moshiach. Mol Oretz Deis Hashem Kamayim LaYom Mechasim. When the entire world, and Jews in particular, will be learning Torah, will be learning Pnimis HaTorah, to know God. So this has been Chassidus Applied, episode 47. If you want to write any question, please write to meaningfullife.com/MyLife Live. If you want to dedicate any of these episodes, please do so. Again, meaningfullife.com/MyLife Live /dedicate. And if you want to write to me personally so I can respond with any questions or any requests, simon@meaningfullife.com. Everyone should have a freilich and Chanukah that radiates, illuminates your life. Any darkness should be dispelled through this light. We should discover and recognize the flask, the shemen of the pach shemen that exists in each soul, that there's no such thing as a hopeless situation, God forbid. Find the elements to be able to discover that purity. It should be a freilich and Chanukah and a very lichtige Woch. And until next Sunday, MyLife episode 48, which will be 8 to 9 p.m. next Sunday, everyone have a freilich and Chanukah. Thank you.